thinking one and the same. And they all to find their freedom and all their liberties had gradually been taken away. And when they realized the danger to their posterity, I heard those patriotic people say, we want this country back. We ain't just joking, Jack. We want our liberty and our dignity and our freedoms and our rights restored. We want this country back. She's been driven way off track. We're wide awake and we're madder than hell now, and we ain't gonna take it anymore. No, we're not gonna take it anymore. Remember golden days when the stars and stripes forever symbolize her glorious name, America. But now it's all been changed, and when we gaze upon her glory, it's hard to fight back feelings of shame. Work it up with lying politicians and greedy corporations who have sold us out time and again. And we're sick and tired of sending our soldiers off to wars that we were never meant to win. We want this country back. We ain't just joking, Jack. We want our liberty and our dignity and our freedoms and our rights restored. We want this country back. She's been driven way off track. We're wide awake and we're madder than hell now, and we ain't gonna take it anymore. No, we're not gonna take it anymore. Now we know our cause is right and our victory's on the way, and we won't give up the fight till we hear 200 million say, we want this country back. We ain't just joking, Jack. We want our liberty and our dignity and our freedoms and our rights restored. We want this country back, and we ain't taking any more back.
Good afternoon, folks. This is Maggie Rose, and this is the New Concord Hour, being brought to you by the Microflex Radio Broadcasting Network out of Idaho. Before we go into today's show, I do want to make an announcement that we had announced last week that Chris Briles was going to come up for part 2. That is the former fire chief of Harney County, Oregon, that he was going to come up today for part 2. But I just got off the phone with him within the hour, and there was an unforeseen family situation that took place. And he is out of the area right now, and it would take him a while to be able to get back home. And rather than trying to do it over his cell phone, which makes it very difficult on Shelby and even on some of you, sometimes cell phones, there's not a very good quality. So we've agreed that we're going to bring him up on Thursday. So I'm going to kind of be winging it today, if you can all bear with me. Again, Chief Chris Briles will be up instead on Thursday. That's the 14th of July, the day after tomorrow, here on the New Concord Hour at 2 o'clock Pacific Standard Time and 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. With that said, what I would like to do first today, before we go into some of the topics that I wanted to choose, I would like to offer any of you that want to come up on the show, give your name if you want, or a nom de plume. You don't have to give the area of the country you're calling from if you don't want to. But please call into area code 208-935-0094. I'll give out that number again. 208-935-0094. Now, at 10 minutes till, we will not be taking any more calls. 10 minutes to the top of the hour, which means Pacific Standard Time at 2:50, we will not take any more calls because we want to give enough time for us to be able to wrap up the show and for us to be able to sign off for the next show to come up behind me. What we're going to be talking about today is a few things. First of all, I had a meeting with somebody in my local area, and we were talking about communities banding together. And this is something Asai has been bringing up quite a bit on the shows in the morning here on the Microeffect. She's been bringing this up on the Manticore group. She's been bringing this up on the Mind Forum, that whatever would happen in this country, we have to pull together. If you cannot find people in your community that will listen to you, it might be the way you are approaching them with it. Some people have what we call the normalcy bias. You have some people out there that used to be very conservative and have become extremely liberal. What you need to do is approach them with things that they can understand, that they can wrap their mind around, that they can digest. That means, for instance, bring up, like I did today in the meeting I had with the community leader that is involved with a large group of the community. He's involved with quite a few children and young people, teenagers. And I brought up to him something that he could verify. And what I brought up to him was the fact that we as people need to pull together as a community in case there was a disaster, like a Cascadia event, some kind of a situation like an earthquake. And one of those things that I brought up to him was the fact that in San Diego, all the way up through British Columbia, they've been having earthquake drills because there's a lot of earthquakes, as we know, that have been taking place around the country and around the world. And in some of these earthquake drills, the mayors of various towns have been preparing their people for the case of a Cascadia event. They've been having them do medical preparedness drills. They've been having them prepare with people learning CPR. And many of the people have been reporting to me that these drills have made them feel a sense of empowerment, that they felt that they were able to feel like they were part of something, that they were able to feel like they were contributing. So if there was an emergency, if there was very, very, well, let's put it this way. What would happen if there was, let's say, an EMP went out over the top of the United States, takes out all of your computer equipment, takes out your new vehicles that are all computerized. It would take out your cell phones. There would be no TV for you to get any news to find out what was going on. So therefore, there would be panic, would there not be? But many of these people out there that do not want to hear about these things, they're living in what we call the normalcy bias. Or they have the attitude, well, if something happens, the government is there to help. Wrong answer. The government is not there to help us. We saw that, what happened in Florida. We saw that with what happened during Katrina. I had a family member in the National Guard down in New Orleans during the Katrina event, and the stories he came back with. Even some of the people that we thought were law enforcement and people that were first responders that we thought were going to do their job, they either did things that went against everything ethically and morally that we believe in, or they were too busy trying to save their own family members. And gangs were roaming the street. We've all seen the video that Glenn Beck has put up on the Blaze of the little lady in her 70s or 80s. Pretty much the Katrina event is over and done with. She's not in danger. She chose to stay in her house. And they came in, 4 or 5 burly men, took away her guns, threw her to the ground. Now, did they take her out of the house for her own safety and well-being? No. They took her guns and they left. And a few days later, she was robbed at gunpoint by some of the thugs roaming the street. Now, if she had been able to defend herself, she might have been able to prevent that. How many people have we heard out there, men, women, even this little 11-year-old girl a few weeks ago, who had a couple burglars break into her house while she was home alone upstairs, and she had learned how to shoot clay pigeons, and she was very good at it, and she ended up killing both these burglars. What could have happened to her if they'd overtaken her? I don't even want to think about it. So yes, from San Diego, and as Aerospaceman in the chat room was asking, from San Diego all the way up to Vancouver, British Columbia, last month in June, they were having evacuation drills, earthquake preparedness drills. And this is what I discussed with this person in our neighborhood. If there's an EMP that goes off, do you have some ham radios that you've got in the Faraday cage so you'll be able to make some contact with the outside world? Have you learned how to operate a ham radio? Have you gone down and gotten your license? It's not that difficult to do. It takes a little bit of study, a little bit of memorization. Have you gone down to your local American Heart Association, which is my personal favorite? And have you learned basic CPR? Everybody from the age of 10 on should know how to do CPR. No excuse. If we can invest $20, $30 to go to the movies, we can invest in every person in this country to spend $20 or $30 or $40 and go take a CPR class, which also includes getting your card, and it's good for 2 years. So these are the things that I have been discussing with people, and there's people out there believing they'll never declare martial law. Well, folks, are you aware of the fact we've been under martial law since around the Civil War or thereabout after? How many people are not aware of it? Most people out there are not aware of it. They're not aware of the fact that martial law has been imposed upon us in one way or another for over 100 years. I'm hearing, folks, a lot of white noise in the background, so bear with me. I'm hoping that we might be able to figure out where that white noise is coming from. So, with that set aside, folks, I know there's people out there that believe that these things can never happen, that Japanese were rounded up during World War II based on prejudice. We saw genocide happening during World War II in Europe. We saw things like this happening in Rwanda. We've seen things happen like this in Croatia and all around the world. If you don't think another civil war could take place on our shores, then think again. If you think our government is there for us, think again. The cabal, the New World Order. These people believe that we are the useless eaters and feeders. They believe we are the minutia beneath their feet. They have been living off the backs of primarily the middle class in this country. The division between the rich and the poor only keeps getting wider and wider. And there's going to come a time, folks, when what's going to happen is the people are going to rise up. Now, right now, what I believe is happening is the powers may be are trying to cause racial division between us. They're trying to cause religious wars between us here in our own country. They're trying to cause racial division. Folks, we may all have our own personal upbringing, our own prejudices, depending upon what part of the country we came from. Let me tell you a story. My mother and my father were traveling through the South, and this was probably in the 70s or early mid-80s, late 70s, early mid-80s. And they were traveling through one of the southern states, and I choose not to mention which one it was, but it was one of the deep south southern states. And they came along a really serious accident. And there was a man lying in the gutter, and he was bleeding, he was unconscious, he was in really bad shape. And as my parents started to get out of the car, an ambulance pulled up. And as the ambulance pulled up, the paramedics got out, and they looked down into the drainage pit down there where the side of the road and saw the man that was lying there unconscious, severely injured and bleeding, unconscious. And they took one look at him and just jumped back in their ambulance and took off. Well, my mother got all kind of upset, as she would, and she started to jump out to see, what can we do to go help this guy? And my dad pulled her back in the car and said, no, out here where we are, you don't want to do this. We'll go to the next town and we'll report it. So my mother basically did what my father said. She got back in the car, and they drove to the next town, and she walked into the closest business that was there, and the lady basically, hey, sweetie, what can we do to help you? And my mother said, do you have a phone? I need a phone right now. And my mother was in a panic. And the lady said, well, what's wrong? And my mother said, there's been a man in a really bad accident on the side of the road. And he's unconscious, he's severely injured, he's bleeding, and, I need to call somebody. We need to call 911. And the first thing that the lady of this business said, and I don't know if she was a waitress or a store clerk, but she goes, well, was he black or white? And he was black. And the lady said, we don't have a phone. So, folks, to me, this is something that is unforgivable. And that this was still going on in the 70s and 80s, and I bet it's still going on around this country now. To me, this is something that is just unforgivable. A person is still a child of God. They're not animals. They're not dogs and cats. They're not monkeys. They're human beings that have feelings they love, they dislike. They have all the same feelings that we do, and they're just as human as you and I are. It doesn't matter what their skin color is. I talked to my mother a little bit about that, and I told her about when I served in the military, and that my husband and I are both in the agreements that we didn't even see skin color for the most part at all when we were in the military. A soldier was a soldier was a soldier. And many of them didn't see my skin color either. We had Asians and Hispanics and blacks and whites and Indians, Native Americans. It did not matter. We were soldiers. We were Americans. We were brothers and sisters watching for each other's backs. That's all I saw. My mother was born in 1935. She told me when she was a little girl, sometime in the late 30s, early 40s, I don't think she was even 8, 9 years old. I think she was a lot younger. That she was walking with her mother in Oakland, California. And there was a park. They were starting to walk through the park. And there was a big commotion going on. A lot of people screaming and yelling and whooping and hollering it up. And the closer my grandmother got to see where all the news was, all the commotion was, all of a sudden she grabbed my mother, covered her eyes, and quickly got her out of that park. Now, folks, this was in Oakland, California. This was only 30 minutes from San Francisco. Later on, when my mother got older, my grandmother told her that what my grandmother had walked upon was a crowd of people that were lynching a black man from a tree there in the Oakland, California area. In the area that I'm living in right now, I understand there was a huge, gigantic KKK on the West Coast. Up and down the West Coast, in the North Pacific. Folks, I would really hope that with what we've seen going on in the past few days, that we're seeing that Black Lives Matter, it's nothing but a bunch of thugs now, that they don't have any mission statement. They don't have anything to show us that they have anything positive that's going to come out of this. Now we have this new Black Panther Party. We have to keep ourselves calm. We have to keep ourselves focused. We have to realize that the government powers may be. We have our government, the executive, judicial, and legislative branch. Below that, folks, is a government that most of the American people don't know about. It's called the shadow government. And members of the shadow government also make up the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations. They will send actors in to actually cause a situation. so they can have all the media focusing in on those people that are causing an incident. We saw this happen during serious shooting incidences across the country. And we noticed the same men and women showing up at every one of these events, going from Florida to New Hampshire, Connecticut, down to San Bernardino, going also up into Harney County. These same people would show up either while the incident was taking place or after the incident had just concluded. These so-called actors trying to keep things stirred up, trying to get people emotionally out of control. Folks, they want an excuse to be able to crack down on the American populace. Now, I don't know people out there saying it's fear-mongering when we turn around and we talk about, an EMP. We saw what happened with North Korea the other day. They shot up with one of their test missiles. Sooner or later, it's going to reach here. If it's not going to be that, it's going to be an EMP from Russia or elsewhere. Or it's going to be a nuclear, biological, chemical bomb that's going to go off. We already know that there's powers may be in the shadow government that are planning nuclear, biological, chemical weapons in all the major cities around this country. And we know there's people that are trying to circumvent them and trying to remove them. It's very dangerous in this time and what's going on in this country, folks. So you have to be vigilant. You have to be calm. You have to continue to prep for any and all contingencies. Now, with that said, what I wanted to talk about today was the FBI. I wanted to talk about how the FBI was opposing the Clinton indictment, that they were ignoring overwhelming evidence, and that the FBI was opposing the Clinton indictment. I was shocked because even her staff, Huma Abedin, admitted that Hillary destroyed state records. She was one of Hillary Clinton's closest aides, and when she was recently deposed by the Judicial Watch, she admitted that Hillary was destroying records willfully. Folks, listen to this.
Committee on Oversight and Government Reform will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. I want to thank Director Comey for being here and doing so on short notice. I have the greatest admiration for the FBI. My grandfather was a career FBI agent. I tell you, I'm here because we're mystified and confused by the fact pattern that you laid out and the conclusions that you reached. It seems that there are two standards, and there's no consequence for these types of activities and dealing in a careless way with classified information. It seems to a lot of us that the average Joe, the average American, that if they had done what you laid out in your statement, that they'd be in handcuffs, and they might be on their way to jail, and they probably should. And I think there is a legitimate concern that there is a double standard. If your name isn't Clinton or you're not part of the powerful elite, that Lady Justice will act differently. It's a concern that Lady Justice will take off that blindfold and come to a different conclusion. Hillary Clinton created this mess. It wasn't Republicans. It wasn't anybody else. She made a very conscious decision. On the very day that she started her Senate confirmation, she set up and got a domain name and set up a system to avoid and bypass the safety, security, and the protocol of the State Department. Classified information is classified for a reason. It's classified because if it were to get out into the public, there are nefarious actors, nation states, others that want to do harm to this country. And there are people who put their lives on the line protecting and serving our country. And when those communications are not secure, it puts their lives in jeopardy. This classified information is entrusted to very few. But there is such a duty and an obligation to protect that, to fall on your sword to protect that. And yet there doesn't seem to be any consequence. You know, I was talking to Trey Gowdy, and he made a really good point with us yesterday. Mr. Gowdy said, in your statement, Mr. Director, you mentioned that there was no precedent for this. But we believe that you have set a precedent, and it's a dangerous one. The precedent is if you sloppily deal with classified information, if you're cavalier about it, and it wasn't just an innocent mistake, this went on for years, that there's going to be no consequence. We're a different nation in the United States of America. We are self-critical. Most nations would never do this. But we do it in the spirit of making ourselves better. There'll be all kinds of accusations about political this and political that. I have defended your integrity every step of the way. You are the definitive voice. I stand by that. But I am mystified, and I am confused, because you listen to your fact pattern and come to the conclusion that there is no consequence. I don't know how to explain that. We'll have constituents ask us. They'll get mad. They'll pound it. They're frustrated. They've seen this happen time and time again. I don't know how to explain it. And I hope that through this hearing, we can stick to the facts and understand this, because there does seem to be two standards. There does seem to be no consequence. And I want to understand that. And I want to be able to explain it to the person that's sitting at home. And that's why we're here. And so I yield back.
Now, folks, what you just saw there, or what you heard there, okay, that was brought up on MSBN Live. That was also, I want to thank the Across All who published this on July the 7th, 2016. That was the FBI Director James Comey, who appeared before the House Oversight Government Reform Committee to answer questions about the Bureau's investigation of the use of a private email server by Hillary Clinton while she was Secretary of State. And as you all know, last Tuesday, he recommended not charging Clinton with any wrongdoing, despite evidence of extremely careless conduct, which I believe, folks, also put our nation at security risk. As Chaffetz said, he's confused, he's mystified. Representative Chaffetz, I feel, was a lot kinder to Director Comey of the FBI than I would have been. I believe that Hillary, what she did was criminal, and I believe she should be held accountable. Any of the rest of us had done that, we would have gone to jail. There's people sitting in jail right now, or people who have lost their careers, lost their families for less than what she has done. Folks, we're going to go to a station break. We'll be right back in just a few minutes. And, folks, this is Maggie Rose. This is the New Concord Hour, being brought to you by the Micro Effect. If you want to call into the show, it's 208-935-0094. Again, folks, it's 925, area code 208-935-0094. We'll be right back. When we come back, we'll be discussing regarding the overwhelming evidence with the FBI opposing the Clinton indictment. And we will also be talking about what some of the other people in the Department of Justice felt about Clinton and her lack of remorse, her excuses in her life to the American people.
No time
makes America the greatest country in the world?
Well, our Constitution is a masterpiece. James Madison was a genius. The Declaration of Independence is, for me, the single greatest piece of American writing.
What about the people? Why is
Not the greatest country in the world, Professor. That's my answer. The NEA is a loser. Yeah, it accounts for a penny out of our paycheck, but he gets to hit you with it anytime he wants. It doesn't cost money. It costs votes. It costs airtime, column inches. You know why people don't like liberals? Because they lose. If liberals are so smart, how come they lose always?
Hey.
And with a straight face, you're going to tell students that America is so star-spangled awesome that we're the only ones in the world who have freedom? Canada has freedom. Japan has freedom. The UK, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, Australia, Belgium has freedom. So 207 sovereign states in the world, like 180 of them have freedom. All right. And yet you, sorority girl, just in case you accidentally wander into a voting booth one day, there's some things you should know. One of them is there is absolutely no evidence to support the statement that we're the greatest country in the world. We're 7th in literacy, 27th in math, 22nd in science, 49th in life expectancy, 178th in infant mortality, 3rd in median household income, number 4 in labor force, and number 4 in exports. We lead the world in only 3 categories: number of incarcerated citizens per capita, number of adults who believe angels are real, and defense spending, where we spend more than the next 26 countries combined, 25 of whom are allies. Now, none of this is the fault of a 20-year-old college student, but you nonetheless are, without a doubt, a member of the worst generation ever. So when you ask what makes us the greatest country in the world, I don't know what you're talking about. Sure used to be. We stood up for what was right. We fought for moral reasons. We passed laws, struck down laws for moral reasons. We waged wars on poverty, not poor people. We sacrificed. We cared about our neighbors. We put our money where our mouths were, and we never beat our chest. We built great big things, made ungodly technological advances, explored the universe, cured disease, and we cultivated the world's greatest artists and the world's greatest economy. We reached for the stars, acted like men. We aspired to intelligence. We didn't belittle it. It didn't make us feel inferior. We didn't identify ourselves by who we voted for in the last election, and we didn't scare so easy. We were able to be all these things and do all these things because we were informed by great men who were revered. First step in solving any problem is recognizing there is one. America is not the greatest country in the world anymore.
Welcome back, folks. This is Maggie Rose, the new Concord Hour, being brought to you by the Micro Effect. And we have been talking about the FBI opposing any kind of an indictment over Hillary Clinton. Now, folks, we all have personal feelings about what's going on with this election. I, for one, am very shocked that Bernie Sanders, even though I probably would not have voted for him, I don't know, but I probably would have not had. But now that all of a sudden, as a so-called independent, he's jumping onto the Clinton bandwagon, maybe he thinks if she was to make president, he could be her vice president. I don't know. But one of the things that is concerning me, I'm talking to a lot of people out there, and yes, many times we feel like we're voting for the lesser of 2 or 3 evils. I believe this country has a lot of problems right now as far as business sense, economics. So in those regards, I think that possibly Trump would be a really good answer. Whether or not he would be a hothead and he would lose control, I don't see that he has lost control over his huge enterprise, the corporations that he's built up. So I really don't know, but for those of you out there saying, look, if Bernie Sanders is not going to be on the ticket and Hillary is going to be, I'm just going to stay home. going to vote for anybody because I don't want Hillary to get in. Do you realize, folks, that if you don't vote for somebody, Hillary will get in? If you're one of those that does not want Hillary in, by you staying home and not voting at all, you're actually going to help her beat Trump. And I don't know about you all, but I do not want to vote for somebody because they're a woman, because of the fact that they have, female parts. That's not the reason why I would want to vote for somebody, just to say that I voted for the first female president. Do you realize that there's a lot of people out there right now that are waiting to the very last moment, and they're going to wait until they think the person that they think is winning, whether they wanted them or not, and then they're going to run down and vote so they can say, guess what? I voted for the person that got in. Oh, my goodness. That's not the way to do it, folks. You don't wait until the very, very last minute, especially on the West Coast, and then wait until see who is far ahead, and then you run down and vote for that person, even if you didn't want them, just so you can say that I voted for the person that got in, or I'm going to vote for her because she's a woman and she believes in women's rights. Really? Is that why she's taken millions of dollars for her so-called Clinton Foundation that does charitable acts? Really? Follow the paper trail, folks. She has been part of the problem, taking millions of dollars from countries that treat their women less than they do their own dog. I was watching on YouTube the other day the graduation of men and women from boot camp in the Kurdish army. Those women are awesome. They could put a lot of our women here in the United States to shame. These women are fighting for women's rights. They're fighting for their countrymen. They're fighting for the right to be free, and they're not afraid to die for the right to remain free. In fact, I understand that ISIS has been told that if you come across the Kurdish army with women, you are to grab your weapons and you are to run the other direction. Because to be killed by a man, if an ISIS soldier is killed by a man, then he's dying for a good cause and he gets to go to heaven and he gets 72 virgins. But did you know that if an ISIS is killed by a woman soldier, a Kurdish woman soldier, that he believes and his so-called religion believes that he goes to hell. So the ISIS will actually grab their weapons and they will go the other direction rather than be killed by a Kurdish army female soldier. I didn't know that. Believe me, I'm cheering on those Kurdish women. Wherever you are out there, God bless you all. Many of the people fighting for Syria, for their country, many of them are not Muslims. Many of them are Christians who are being butchered and slaughtered by the ISIS. So, folks, in the Beacon today, I found issue number 27, volume 9, July 6th through July 12th. It's entitled, Ignoring Overwhelming Evidence. The FBI opposes Clinton indictment. Now, if anybody wants to call into the show, it's area code 208-935-0094. I'd like to hear your opinion. But Hillary is a monster. She and the Clinton Foundation are in bed with Uranium One. You need to write letters to your senators and congressmen, do what I suggested last week, and take a stamp, put it upside down on the envelope, and mail it out to your representatives that you're aware of the fact that Uranium One is in bed with Hillary, and that Hillary and Obama, along with Harry Reid, have been going after the ranchers and farmers, the breadbasket of this country. Take away their ranches and their farms, not just the grazing rights in the open land around them, but even their own personal property. Because there are minerals and resources that companies like Uranium One want to go in and mine. There's companies that want to do fracking, and they want to do mining. They the Hammonds out in eastern Oregon, the Lavoie Finnegans in Arizona, the Bundys in Nevada have precious resources and metals like uranium and thorium and other resources underneath their ranches, underneath their homesteads. And this is what Hillary wants. She and Bill Gates, who now is invested very, very heavily in nuclear reactors, they want the minerals that they could put in those nuclear reactors, and many of those minerals are underneath the literal homesteads of the Bundys, the Finnegans, and the Hammonds. American people need to wake up and see what's happening. There are videos you can find up on YouTube of the BLM going to parties, the Bureau of Land Management giving each other retirement parties and congratulation parties, where they're boasting about how many people's properties they grabbed up and took, how many lands that they stole, how many people they pushed off their own property, kicked off their own land, and boasting about it. They even had charts up. You go on YouTube and you'll find it. They have charts up that are talking about how the BLM have gone in with their guns blazing, pointing their guns and their weapons at people and making them leave. They're no different to me than the Nazi Gestapo. I don't care how much you would pay me. I would never go work for the BLM. I would never go work for the Department of Forestry. This article in the Beacon, the FBI will not recommend that former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton be indicted for her use of a private email server, regardless of the fact that she certainly violated the law and risked the national security. Quote, FBI Director James Comey said on Tuesday that the FBI was unable to find any evidence that Clinton intended to break the law and that no reasonable prosecutor would bring charges in this case. However, incredibly, in his same statement, he actually acknowledged that Clinton did break the law. Comey's statement was, in his own words, quote, an unusual statement in at least a couple ways. He listed those ways as, folks, you can find this in the Roseburg Beacon, Roseburg, Oregon. He listed them as the amount of information about the investigation itself. Quote, first, I'm going to include more detail about our process than I ordinarily would because I think the American people deserve those details in a case of intense public interest. Two, the fact that everyone inside and outside of the government was hearing for the first time the FBI recommendation. Quote, second, I have not coordinated or reviewed this statement in any way with the Department of Justice or any other part of the government. They do not know what I'm about to say. Oh, really? Comey then detailed three things, what we did. He said, quote, what we found and what we are recommending to the Department of Justice. Comey said the investigation looked at both, quote, whether there's evidence classified information was improperly stored or transmitted on that personal system in violation of federal statute making it a felony to mishandle classified information, either intentionally or in a grossly negligent way. And, quote, a second statute making it a misdemeanor to knowingly remove classified information from appropriate systems or storage facilities. He then spent the bulk of his statement excusing Clinton. Again, folks, he spent the bulk of his statement excusing Clinton by focusing on the FBI's failure to prove that she had acted with any quote-unquote intent to break the law. Now, let's just pause right there for a moment, folks. In the article, it says, Comey admitted that contrary to Clinton's claims to both the public and that she did absolutely without doubt send and receive emails containing information that was classified when it was sent and received. In fact, there were 110 of them. Emails in 52 email chains that have been determined by the owning agency to contain classified information at the time they were sent or received. 8 of those chains contain information that was top secret at the time they were sent. 36 chains contained secret information at the time, and 8 contained confidential information, which is the lowest level of classification. Separate from those, about 2,000 additional emails were classified to make them confidential. The information, those had not been classified at the time the emails were sent. Now, folks, let me explain something to you here, okay? There is confidential, which is the lowest. There is secret, which is the next step up. There is top secret, and then there's one even above top secret. So it goes from bottom to highest, confidential, secret, top secret, and then even higher than that. Many of us in the military, those of us of high enlisted rank, all those who are officers' rank, have at least a secret. We have to go through a huge background check where they interview everybody, our family members, our friends, where we went to school, you name it. They take our life apart with a fine-tooth comb. And yet we're seeing here that 36 chains contained secret information at the time, and 8 contained confidential. And 8 of those chains contained information that was top secret. Folks, how many people have gone to jail, been prosecuted, and fined for less than what she's done? Article next to it on the same front page of the Roseburg Beacon, issue 27, July 6th through July 12th. Huma Abedin admits that Hillary destroyed state records. Huma Abedin, one of Hillary's closest aides, in a recent disposition with Judicial Watch, that the former Secretary of State would sometimes destroy her daily schedule. An admission characterized the diplomat as shocking and rarely, if ever. Folks, so we're looking at Representative Jason Chaffetz talking to FBI Director James Comey. And in that interview, the FBI director admitted she did break the law. I don't think Representative Jason Chaffetz is the only one who is, quote, mystified and confused by the FBI conclusions. I know that I am. I'm sure you are. Her aide, Huma Abedin, admitted that there was a schedule that was created that was her Secretary of State daily schedule, and a copy of that was then put in the burn bag. And that would certainly happen on more than one occasion, unquote. Abedin said to the Lawyers for Judicial Watch, which is a nonprofit that's taking the lead in suing over the Clinton email server scandal. And this was reported by the New York Post. Abedin's comments came in response to a question from the attorney that went like this, quote, and during your tenure at the State Department, were you aware of your obligation not to delete federal records or destroy federal records, unquote. Clinton has previously admitted to destroying personal emails she characterized as private. But Abedin's statement of her using burn bags, quote unquote, which is a specifically constructed container to burn things, is new. And according to at least one former State Department official, she, and we're talking about Abedin, her admission was shocking. Quote, I spent 8 years at the State Department and watched as 4 U.S. ambassadors, 2 secretaries of state, shared their daily schedules with a variety of State Department employees and U.S. officials, said Richard Grinnell, a former diplomat who served as a spokesman for the United States at the United Nations. According to the New York Post reported, quote, I've never seen anyone put their schedule in a burn bag because every one of them had a stage.government email address, and therefore their daily schedules became public records as required by law, unquote. John Bolton, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, called Clinton's actions irresponsible, but then said her schedules could not have been completely destroyed. Quote, it was recklessness, Bolton said, of the burn bag. treatment of Clinton's schedules, but they can't eliminate it even if they wanted to. The Associated Press sued the State Department in 2015 for copies of Clinton's private and public calendars and schedules from January 2009 through February 2013. Folks, I am so blessed that I am no longer serving in uniform, that I'm serving in other ways this wonderful country. I want to thank those of you that are in the chat room right now: Aerospace Man, Betty Boop, Evanjo, Hardway 90909, Hugh 3, Theocrat, and Valerie. All of you feel the same way. Those of you in the listening audience out there, that it's not right for we, the American people, to be held to a different standard than those that are elected and representing us. Whether you're elected or you're appointed over the people of the United States, you are not over us. We are your employer. You are under us. And why should you be held to a different standard than the rest of us? How arrogant and selfish and self-serving. That, in my book, is who Clinton is. And she's not the only one, but she's been the one who's been the most grievous to what she's been doing to the American people. My message to you, Ms. Clinton, is that even if I was serving in uniform, I would be very, very what I would do or not do, because I would not follow an illegal order. I may have to, if I was wearing a uniform, as many of my soldiers are today, if you were the commander-in-chief, they would have to follow the orders of their superiors. But I would hope more of their superiors would take the action that many of our lieutenant colonels and our colonels and our generals have taken, and say they will not do something that goes against the American people. They will not violate the Constitution. You, Ms. Clinton, you have violated the Constitution over and over again. You have stepped on the toes of the little people. You do not believe in the rights of women. You've proven that by sleeping in bed with those people that treat women less than the dogs that they feed the scraps underneath their table. You say one thing and you do something else. I would never vote for you, even on the best of days. You, Hillary Clinton, have become a traitor to this country. You are treasonous, and all your minions that follow you. And any of you people out there that are wanting to vote for her because she's a woman, or because you want to say that you put the first woman president in the White House, like many of you only voted because somebody was black, not because you really looked into his background and really knew where he came from. And I'm not talking about where he was born. I'm talking about how he was raised, the ideologies that he was raised with, the sort of people that raised him in socialistic, communistic circles, and he became the President of the United States. He has been dismantling this country bit by bit by bit, and Hillary has been helping him with her own agendas, helping to dismantle in this country. You are not above the law, Ms. Clinton. You work for us. And I, for one, rule the day that I pray that you never make it in the White House. Now, I know you've had people buy off other people, and I know you went to the Bilderberg meeting, and I know they promised you the presidency a few years ago, but finally decided to hold you off and put Obama in there because he was so popular with the people, with some of the people anyway. And they told you, just wait, let him make president now, and they would make you president later. We already know that all of our votes are being sent overseas to Spain, and Spain is the one contracted to count our votes. We already know that most of our military people serving in Europe and serving on aircraft carriers and submarines, that their votes are being kept on pallets in the hulls of the aircraft carriers. They're being kept in the hulls of the submarines and not even airlifted to shore to be counted. We know that because New York is 3 hours ahead of the West Coast, they start calling the election as soon as the voting booths close on the East Coast. So people on the West Coast go, wow, they're already telling us who's won. even though that may not be the truth. So we might as well not even go at 6 o'clock tonight or 7 o'clock tonight after dinner to our voting booths that close at 8 o'clock and vote, because our vote means nothing, because they're already calling it back in New York. The Washington Times, the New York Post, Fox News, NBC News, they're already calling the election, so why even go vote? Our vote doesn't count anywhere. It's been rigged. They're going to put someone in the White House no matter what the people want. And that has been, for a long time, people have believed that the Electoral College is broke. For a long time, they have believed that the American people are not being listened to. So, folks, again, the FBI and their lies, the FBI and their intimidation, as Chief Harney County Fire Chief Chris Briles, who will be up this Thursday because he couldn't make it today. So he will be up tomorrow. Or not tomorrow. Tomorrow's Ladies Roundtable. He'll be up Thursday. But yes, the FBI has lied and intimidated the American people, and now the FBI is ignoring overwhelming evidence that should be indicting Hillary Clinton. Folks, with that said, let's pray for our country. Let's pray for each other. This is Maggie Rose in the New Concord Hour. I'll be with you tomorrow with Cy and Donna on Ladies Wednesday Roundtable, and then on Thursday with former Fire Chief Chris Briles from Harney County. God bless and good night.